Hello dear students, and today we will talk about bones of the skull and skull bones. I take this skull, I wanted to show this one, and let's try to identify. This is the frontal view, and we can find here frontal bone, and which bones we can find from here. From anterior side we can find two nasal bones, this two nasal bones, and this one's the maxillar bones, zygomatic bones, and mandible bones. This one's the teeth. Let's make the lateral view. From lateral side we can see parietal bones are there, they are periods, and temporal bones and occipital bones. And from here we can identify the base of the skull, and also we can totally we have мышка не работает. Totally we have we divided this bones of the skull. Мышка не работает. We divide into the facial bones and cranial bones. Now my mouse will start. And what's the function of the skull? The skull bones are forms the framework of the face and provide the support of the entrance of the digestive and respiratory system. And together, cranial and facial bones protect our brain and special organs, for example, sense organs, vision organs, taste organs, smell organs, and hearing organs, and bones equilibrium. And how I said, we divide into two parts, cranial bones and facial bones. And we have 8 cranial bones and 14 facial bones. But it's not... And here we have... let's divide like this. This part will be the facial bones. Here we have the cranial bones. And here we must know about 8 cranial bones, so starting from frontal bone, parietal bone, occipital bone. And temporal and sphenoid bone and ethmoid bone also include the cranial bones. Here's the frontal bone, parietal bone, occipital bone, and temporal bone. This one is the sphenoid bone. Okay. We came to here, and we can see the biggest parts, and 2/3 of the part it's the cranial part, and the smaller part is the facial part. Here we can see, and okay, this one is, and let's count them. For example, cranial bones are included. We say the frontal bone, parietal bone, 2 parietal bones we have, and unperiod occipital bone, period temporal bone, and unperiod sphenoid and ethmoid bone. And let's talk one by one from here. This bone is the frontal bone, and frontal bone have parts also. It has squamous parts, this part, and orbital part it have, and lateral part. And it have 3 surfaces. Frontal surface, it have visceral surface, and it have orbital surfaces. And each joining with the 2 parietal bones are here. We have this, and this joint will be called like the fibrous joint, and this joint will be called like coronal sutures. And the frontal bones forms forehead of frontal squama, this part, squama part, and superior of the orbits, the orbital bone thickness forming the supraorbit margins. where is the supraorbit margins? Let's make like this. These parts will be supraorbit margins. From the margins of orbital bone extends posteriorly from the roof of orbit. This one is the roof of orbit, which part is the floor of cranial cavity. And let's say it like this. This one also forms the base cranial cavity. Okay, and we come from anterior side, and from outside within the supraorbital margins. Here, this margins, we'll call it supraorbital margins. Slightly middle of the midpoint, we have supraorbital foramen. Here, it's not very same. Here we have supraorbital foramen in normally, but here I can't show you for you. And we have supraorbital foramen, and which arteries and nerves are going through this foramen. And frontal bone have sinus also. In this body of this frontal bone, we have sinus. How to show for you? Frontal sinus. We have two frontal sinus are here, and people say, and sinus call it like a frontal air sinus. And we came to parietal bones. These parietal bones, we have two parietal bones from each side, left and right. They are joining from anterior side with frontal bone, and from back side it's joining with occipital bone. From lower side it's joining with temporal bones. And here, the two parietal bones are joining with each other by suture. This suture we will call like sagittal suture, because it's staying in sagittal line here between two bones. We have sagittal suture, and it have two surfaces. If, for example, frontal bone have three surfaces, it was anterior, frontal surface, orbital surface, and lateral surface. This one, visceral surface, anterior and lateral. And here, their parietal bones have just two surfaces, and they have the parietal foramen are here, but foramens are not seen here. Maybe we must do something to see these foramens. They can't do anything. Okay, and we can see this sulcus foramen like this. Their shape of this arteries. And we came to occipital bone, and occipital bone is on period. We said about two parietal bones. It's three bones we are talking, and fourth one it's occipital bone. And occipital bone we can find from back side, and it have also parts, and forms the posterior part of the most base of the cranium. It's also when we do like this, it forms base of the cranium, and when we are making like this, it have posterior part, and it have you can see the biggest foramen, and we will call like foramen magnum are here. And why it's foramen magnum? It's inferior part of the occipital bone. With this foramen, medulla oblongata connects with the spinal cord. And this one is a part of central nervous system going from to the spinal cord. It's also part of the central nervous system. And it's joining with these pedicles. Can you see the pedicles? Normally, this pedicles, and it's joining with this first cervical vertebra or axis. And here we have a body of occipital bone, and occipital bone have condyles. This one is the condyles, or also you can call pedicles, and this one is articulation surface for the first cervical vertebrae, and superior of each occipital condyle on the inferior surface skull is the hypoglossal foramen. This one, the little bit superior, let's put like this, superior, we can find occipital foramen there. Okay, and we can identify here when we are putting like this, this squamous part, this one's the body, this one's the articulation surface, and this one's the foramen magnum. And the external occipital tubercle, when we put like this, we can see the tubercle here, external one. Is a prominent middle protective projection of the posterior surface of the bone just above the foramen magnum, which we see here. So we have foramen magnum just above the foramen magnum we have here, and large fibrous elastic ligaments are coming in a touch of these tuberosities. And here, when we are putting like this, we can see tuberosities are here, external occipital tuberosities, and here we can identify lines. We have external lines, superior and inferior one, and this one is condyles of here. This one is a condyles foramen magnum, and occipital bone is extending laterally from the protuberance are two curved ridges, their superior neutral lines, and below there are two inferior neutral lines we have, which attach our muscles. Why it lines becoming? Because these muscles are attaching to here. But if we are making like this, we can identify these lines. And let's come to another bone. This bone is a sphenoid bone. Oh, I delete this one. And let's delete other one. This one is a sphenoid bone. And here we can identify lies in the middle of the base of the skull. Here we have base of the skull and lies in the middle part, and the keystone of the cranial cranial floor, because it's articulated with all other cranial bones. If you are making like this, it's joining with all other cranial bones. For example, from anterior side it joins from frontal bone, parietal bone. Here it joins from this parietal bone. Here we have temporal bone, and it's joined with temporal bone also. Okay, and this and sphenoid articulation joint anteriorly with this frontal bone, laterally with temporal bone, and posteriorly with occipital bone. Where is the occipital bone? Here's the body of the occipital bone, and here it's joining with occipital bone. And sphenoid bone is also have sphenoid sinus, and I will show next time in MRI. But now it's lie posteriorly, slightly superior of the nasal cavity. Where is the nasal cavity? Nasal cavity are here. This one is the nose. Let's make like this. Here is the nose, and it's a little bit posterior of the nasal cavity, and forms a part of the floor side walls and rear wall of the orbits. You can see here this orbits, and it forms the rear wall of the orbit. Shape of sphenoid resembles as a bat. If you are looking like this, it says a bat. Okay, make like this. You must beat. Let's make an white one. This one. Where is the skeleton, and we must find the sphenoid bone. Os. Oh, it's not that one. This one. And you can see here the forms as a bat out with the outer distinct wings. We have wings. We are drawing the wings. This one we have bigger wings, greater wings, and lesser wings. We have body of sphenoid cube-like medial portion between the ethmoid and occipital bone. Where's the body? Body is here. This one, why it's staying like this? Here we have the body. This body of sphenoid bone. And here we can identify foramens. This foramen is optic foramen. Here we have a chiasma, optic chiasma, and from here is going nerves, optic nerves are there. And this one is greater wings, and this one is laser wings, small one. Greater wings and laser wings. Let's see this one. Greater and laser wings. Okay, we are coming back to our sphenoid bone. Oh, a little bit wait, we must wait. Опять не работает. My mouse not working. I'm trying to do something. And we know the sphenoid bone, we say it forms middle parts of the cranial bone. А моя не работает. Ну все, начала работать опять. Ты из-за батарейки? We have some problems with my mouse, I think it's normal. And we came to the body of sphenoid bone, and we are talking about wings. We said it's a shape of the bat, and it have greater wings and laser wings. And it contains the sphenoidal sinus in body of sphenoid bone, which is opening and draining into the nasal cavity because it forms the posterior superior part of the nasal cavity. And here we can identify these parts. This one we will call like cellular tursca. It's bony, saddle-shaped structure on superior surface of body of sphenoid bone. And this anterior of the part of cellular tursca, which forms the horn of saddle, and ridge call it like tubercle of saddle. Where is the tubercle of saddle? Here. Here we have tubercle of saddle, and in this saddle we can find pituitary gland. Okay, we can find pituitary glands, and we have many foramens are there. And also the part of this sphenoid bone are coming to lower part. Here forms the lateral walls of nasal cavity. And the seat of the saddle of the depression called like hypoglossal or hypophyseal fossa, this one, and which is contained pituitary gland, we said about it, and posterior part of the cellular tursca, which forms the back of saddle, and another ridge. Posterior part, the back of the saddle, this part, and another ridge called like dorsal cella. The greater wings of sphenoid protects laterally from the body and forms anterolaterally, anteriorly and laterally floor of cranium. The greater wings. And here we can identify foramen rotundum. Here is a foramen rotundum, and this one is a supraorbital, superior orbital fissure. This one, superior orbital fissure, and let's orbital foramen, supraorbital fissure, and this one we will call foramen rotundum. And also we have process. We can see processes here. Middle process. We have two middle processes, and two lateral processes are here. And we can call like pterygoid processes, which are forms the back lateral wall of nasal cavity. And the greater wings of the also form parts and lateral wall of the skull. From here, from two lateral side, we can see the lateral walls of the skull, and anterior and temporal and have joints with temporal bone, and laser wings, which are smaller, form a ridge of bone anterior superior of greater wings. This one anterior superior, staying anterior superior, and this one is laser wings, and they form part of the floor, the cranium, and posterior part of orbit of eye. And we say it's a part of the floor of cranium. This one's cranial part, and posterior posterior wall of the eye. Okay, orbit. And between the body and leather wings, just anterior to the to the tursca, we come to the tursca, and just anteriorly we have optic foramen. I showed where's this one. The smallest one is optic foramen, and lateral the body between the greater and leather wings, triangular, and it's called like superior orbital fissure. This one's longest one is superior orbital fissure, and pterygoid processes are here, and we have structure protects inferiorly from the point where the body and wings unite from the lateral posterior regions, the nasal cavity, lateral and posteriorly, lateral from two lateral and posterior back side and lateral sides of nasal cavity, and some of the muscles that move to mandible attach the pterygoid processes. At the base of the pterygoid process in the greater wings, it is have foramen ovale. Let's show here. And where's the foramen ovale? It's when we are putting like this, we can find here in the base of pterygoid processes. We can find foramen ovale, and the foramen lacerum are bounded anteriorly by the sphenoid bone and medially sphenoid and occipital bones. And when its sphenoid bone and occipital bones are forming, we can find the foramen lacerum. And foramen rotundum located at the junction of anterior medial parts of sphenoid bone. Foramen rotundum I showed here. This one's fissure. This one's foramen rotundum. A little bit bigger. Here was orbital foramens are here, fissure, and foramen rotundum was here. Okay, and we will come to other bone. It will call it like ethmoid bone. It's maxilla bone, but we need ethmoid bone. Here, that's fine. And we can see that ethmoid bone in middle side of cranium of the skull, and slight spongy-like bone. Why? Because in here and the body of sphenoid bone we have air cells, and because of this we can call like spongy-like bone located on middle and anterior part of cranial floor. Whereas the middle here, when we are seeing like this, frontal side in middle and anterior part of cranial floor and the middle part of orbits, and forms middle part of orbits, anterior of sphenoid, posterior of nasal bones. Where's the nasal bones? Here's the nasal bones, posterior of nasal bones, and anterior of sphenoid bones. And sphenoid bone forms part arterial portion of cranial floor. We said anterior portion of cranial floor when we are looking like this. This one is the air cells, and middle wall of the orbit. When we are looking like this one is the orbit, and they are forming the middle wall of the orbit and superior portion of nasal septum. Where is the nasal septum? Oh, I go to other organ. Wait. Okay. Where is the nasal septum? Nasal septum is here, and the superior portion of the nasal septum. Most their superior side wall of the nasal cavity. When we are making like this, we can find most parts of the nasal cavity. And also, the lateral masses of ethmoid bone compose the wall between the nasal cavity and orbits, and they contain tree and air spaces. Where's the spaces? Air spaces, a little bit like this. This one is the air spaces. Are there air cells? It can be 3 or more till to 18. The ethmoid cells together form ethmoid sinus. and the perpendicular plate of the superior portion of nasal septum. Here, perpendicular plate, superior portion of nasal septum. And here we can identify the ethmoid bone. And the ethmoid bone have creep-form pellets plate are here. Creep-form pellet plate are we can find in part, and it lies anterior floor of cranium and forms the roof of nasal cavity. This one is the nasal cavity, roof of nasal cavity, and it's cranium. And the creep-form plate contains olfactory foramina. Let's see here and here we have foramina are not shown here, but we must know the from middle side of creep plate we can find creep-form foramina or olfactory foramina. We can call here, and these olfactory foramina are through which action of the olfactory nerve are passed and goes to the nasal cavity. And let's make a little bit laterally here. And protecting upward from the creep-form plate is a triangular purpose called like cristagalli. Where's the cristagalli? Here, triangular shape. It's a cristagalli. Its structure is served as a point of attachment to the membrane that covers the brain. Okay, cristagalli is one, and the creep-form plates are here, the horizontal one, and when we are making with it here, we have creep-form foraminus or olfactory foraminus we can call. And also it's joining the sphenoid bone from back side, sphenoid bone, this one ethmoid bone from anterior side, it's joining with the frontal bone. And the lateral meshes, let's see from here. Can we see? Okay. Yes. And the lateral mesh of the ethmoid bone contains two thin scroll-shaped projection lateral nasal septum, and the R superior nasal concha and middle nasal concha have. And here we can identify superior nasal concha and inferior middle nasal concha. Here they are formed two conchas and or conches. Someone talk like this, can see it like this. A third pair of concha, we must know that we have third pair of the three conches we have here, superior, middle, and inferior. And inferior one and nasal concha are separate bone. And because of this, ethmoid bone forms just two conches, superior and middle, because it's staying in superior portion of the nasal cavity. And here we can identify the superior nasal concha are there, and the concha cause tubercle in inhale air, which result meaning inhale particle skin. What I did? Okay, let's come back. And tubercles thus clean the inhale before the passes the respiratory tracts. And it is why what's the function of this concha? This concha are making a surface bigger, for example, greater, and it's help to sense of smell and warms the air. And we will come to another bone, like in which bones were it? We are temporal. We will come to temporal bones. We have two temporal bones from two lateral sides, and these temporal bones, you can see inferior lateral aspect of the cranium and the part and flat part of the anterior and superior part of the temple. And protection from the inferior portion of the temporal squamous is the gammatic process. This one is the gammatic process. Let's make it a little bit far from us. This one is 8/2 temporal, and it's joining with temporal process of zygomatic bone, and some could call it a mandibular fossa. Here, under the zygomatic process, we have fossa here, and we can see the mandibular bone are coming here and joining with temporal bone. And anteriorly, a mandibular fossa is rounded elevation called articulated tubercle. And that mandibular fossa articulates with here, and what we can see here from a lateral side, we can find mastoid portion as mass-shaped portion, what we can see, and we can see an external auditory meatus, and here's the canal, the opening, and meatus means a little bit bigger, and anterior auditory meatus. And the mastoid process is a rounded protects the mastoid portion of temporal bones, this part, and the posterior is the external auditory meatus. It's a point of several neck muscles attachments, this one. And the interior auditory meatus is opening through this facial nerve, cranial nerve 7, and vestibular nerve 8, or cranial nerve 8. And we can see this one, smallest one. We are talking about biggest part, mastoid process, and now we'll talk about smallest one. This one is the styloid process, protects inferior from the inferior surface of temporal bone and serves as point attachment to the muscles and ligaments of tongue and neck. Between the styloid process and mastoid process, we can find styloid of mastoid foramen. Can you see styloid and mastoid foramen? Styloid and mastoid foramen are here between two bones, and the floor of cranial cavity. It's here we say this it forming the floor of lateral floor of a cranial cavity. This is the triangular and the portion of temporal bone. This one is a portion of temporal bone. It's this part is triangular. You can see it's triangle shaped like this, and it's located at the base of the skull between the sphenoid and occipital bone, where the sphenoid bone are here, and occipital bone are here. And petrous portion of houses in internal and middle ear structure involve here an equilibrium, this portion. And it also contains carotid foramen. Where is the carotid foramen? Okay, and through the which carotid arteries are passes. Let's see like this. But carotid foramen are here, a little bit like this here, and the carotid arteries are coming and pass from here. And posterior carotid foramen and anterior occipital bones and jugular foramen passes from the jugular vein. But all foramens are not seen from here. From the posterior part of the base of cranium, the foramen magnum is inferior part of the bone. Foramen magnum, which is foramen medulla oblongata, connects with the spinal cords, and the vertebral and spinal arteries also pass through the foramen. This foramen, okay. And here we can identify the temporal bone and temporal bone. Let's put like this. But I can't show you. And here's the jugular foramen. Jugular foramen is a little bit from back side here, and foramen magnum are there, and carotid canal are coming here, a little bit backer. Okay, and we are talking about frontal, parietal, occipital to temporal bones, ethmoid bone, and sphenoid bone. And other one, it's the facial bones. Our facial bones, it's we will talk next time. I think this when we are making our practice lessons like this, it will be better to understand and see, not to just to read something. And Next time we will talk about facial part and facial bones. And now I want to show you an MRI. These bones. Let's see here. And let's start from here, staying in medially like this. And we can firstly see skin are there, and we can identify bones. This one's frontal bone, this one is the occipital bone. And let's try to find parietal bones. Our parietal bones, when we are going to lateral sagittally, we can find the parietal bones are there. And what about other bones? We find these bones which covers our brain from outer side. And let's come to sphenoid bones. This one is a sphenoid bone, which I say is in base of the sphenoid bone, or in body of sphenoid bone, we can identify the sinus are here, and which opening to nasal cavity, and this one is conchae. Our conchae are here, conchae of ethmoid bone, and we go laterally, and this one is a black one. It's spaces, which it's not filled with nothing, and this one is the sinus of ethmoid bone, and here's the sinus of why here's the black, because it has sinus of frontal bone are here. We're talking about three sinus: frontal sinus of frontal bone, sinus of ethmoid bone, and sinus of sphenoid bone. And we have four sinus and sinus of maxillar bones, but that maxillar bones are included to facial bones. Now we are talking just about cranial bones. Okay, and what we can see here from back side of the sinus, we can see the fossa here, or cella turcica, we can call like this. If when we are making MRI, when we are making X-ray, we can find this fossa. Maybe patient have some problems with hormones and reproductivity. Okay, it's also like this. And if we are making like this, it's a coronal or frontal sections of head, and here we can identify an ethmoid bone. Ethmoid bone have a crest here, have a plate here, and have a septum here, and from the two lateral side it forms conchae are there. Superior and middle conchae. Superior and middle conchae are there. And that's all. Apart from a little bit I want to show. And this one, you can identify it's a body of sphenoid bone, I showed. And when we are coming a little bit anteriorly, it's a sinus of sphenoid bone. And if we are going like this one, ethmoid bone, this is the sinus of ethmoid bone. And here is temporal bones, and we can identify these two here. So we can see here, and this external auditory canal are here. And you can see membrane here. It's external auditory canal enclosed by membrane. In this part, it's middle ear, going into middle ear. Okay, what can we identify? What structures you can find? Let's come back. Okay, we finished this one. Okay, we're talking about which bones? Frontal bone, 1 frontal bone, 2 parietal bone. Totally we have 3. Occipital bone, 4. And 2 temporal bones, 5, 6. And ethmoid bone, 7. And sphenoid bone, 8. We are talking about 8 cranial bones. Okay, when we are making it's computer CT or computer tomography, but when we are making like this, we can see all these bones. And how it's articulated. For example, this one, it's articulation surface of the occipital bone is joining with first cervical vertebra. Here we can see. For example, when you are making examination, for example, you can't see all bones normally, and when we are making examination, you must find fractures, you must find the disorders of these bones, and you're looking like this. This one is the orbital parts of the sphenoid bone, and I want to show the orbital part. In the orbital parts, we have fossa or lacrimal fossa. We have there, and which lacrimal glands are hiding in the orbital fossa. Okay, we will finish our practice lesson. If you have some questions, you can send from our group. And some groups send, they say they are missed our practice lesson. For example, GMM2. We have another lecture. But before it, for example, yesterday I talked about for our practice lesson. Why you didn't talk about this? Because I saw that you're free in your schedule. You was free in this part on this time. And other groups said you have time in this today. Okay, we can make something about it, and we will solve this problem. And the next time we will talk about facial bones, and I think for today it's enough, and we are talking about cranial bones. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.